Let's talk some sports, baby.
And remember, make tomorrow better than today and make today better than yesterday. And you know what we gonna do. We gonna holler at you until next time, baby.
All right, guys, let's go ahead and stay in the NBA with more leadership news. And a bit of a surprise, Houston Rockets GM Daryl Morey announced his resignation after 13 seasons, effective at the end of the month. Morey was instrumental in transforming the Rockets into a winning franchise, the acquisition of James Harden, and a forward-thinking drive with analytics. Raphael Stone will be promoted from within to take over the GM duties, while Morey helps ownership find a new head coach. Right now, analyst Jeff Van Gundy appears to be the leading candidate for the job. So, Jay, does this move surprise you, and how might this change the Rockets going forward?
Yeah, I think surprise is probably the right word. I wouldn't say shocked though, especially what has been a kind of a tumultuous year for Daryl Morey, beginning with the tweets or the tweet that kind of was a pretty big controversy really earlier in the season. But based off the owner Tillman Fertitta, it seemed like 2 days after the bubble, I believe he said, "Yeah, I mean we're moving forward with Daryl Morey." And then you get this news, so there's some surprise to it. But Morey's been there for a long time now. He's general manager for 13 years, and that's a pretty good streak. And generally, 13 years with no title and no finals appearance, that might be as long as you want to roll. Even though I'm not trashing the man by any stretch of imagination. I really don't know what more else Daryl Morey could have done to bring a championship to Houston. It started really the kind of step forward for Houston was when they brought in James Harden from Oklahoma City. That kind of got them on the right track. You remember they tried to pair him with Dwight Howard. That really didn't work out. Then later on you bring in Chris Paul. That they were very close to reaching the finals. Then CP3 gets injured, so you had that. And now they just tried again. They tried Russell Westbrook, and even mid-season they retooled. They shipped Clint Capella out of there to go all in, super all in on small ball. And the main driving force behind all of it, as you mentioned, was the super analytics that Daryl Morey believed in, with the 3-point shooting and layups, free throws, neglecting to use the post or the mid range at all. But he did everything he could. And the one thing I will say in credit to him is I think it'd be pretty easy for a lot of teams when you looked at, and a lot of the Rockets' best seasons really, that the Warriors had that 5-year stretch where they just dominated. And it was, a lot of times the Rockets would run up against them and they just couldn't get past them. They had some opportunities, especially this season. The last year KD was in Golden State when he got hurt, and that looked like that seemed to be their opportunity. If you remember in that Game 5, I believe it was, when the series was tied 2-2, and the Rockets let that one get away. And but they had a few chances, but overall it was a lot to ask. It was an uphill battle with going against Golden State, and they never could find the right formula to get it done. And not all of that's on Daryl Morey. I mean, you got to look at Mike D'Antoni at some point and probably put some criticism on him for his part of he's been, and this is something that's been a Mike D'Antoni thing for years. But I mean, he has little to no interest in coaching defense. I mean, that's why he had a defensive coordinator in there, Jeff Bzdelik, for several years. But as far as what it means for the Rockets moving forward, I think it depends on. It depends on who you bring as a head coach, and what is the philosophy of Raphael Stone? Does he have the same philosophy as Daryl Morey? Is he going to continue to go all in on analytics and 3-point shooting and layups and free throws, and are we just going to ignore the post game and the mid range? The numbers may say, and the numbers may well say, don't post up and don't shoot mid-range shots. But if those shots are available and they're good shots, That's just one of the things you've heard. You've heard. I believe Isaiah Thomas has said this before. When you neglect the two scoring areas on the floor, you become a little bit easier to defend because it's either 3-point shooting or they're going to the basket. There's really no in between. And really, they only get away with it because they have a superstar that makes it all work in James Harden. Everything they do is set up by James Harden. So my biggest question for them is who's going to be the coach and what does Raphael Stone believe? I know it's an internal hire. They wanted to have some continuity. I think the owner said that. But I think we have to kind of get a read on what the philosophy is and who the coach is. I think if you bring in if Jeff Van Gundy is indeed the guy, not saying that he is, but if that's the way they choose to go, I don't know if he's going to I think he's going to want to go an alternate route. I don't know, based on listening to him for years, if he's going to be super all in on the analytics because when it's all said and done, they haven't worked. In some of the biggest moments, they haven't worked. You remember that Game 7 against the Warriors when they just refused to stop shooting threes, and the threes just weren't there, but they kept just hoisting them up and missed a whopping 27 straight threes. So I think I'm unsure of what the change will be. I'm unsure of the direction. I think it's kind of a situation almost like perhaps what the Clippers are going to be. I think the Clippers have Kawhi Leonard, and then there's everything else personnel-wise could be a question mark. I think you could kind of look at the Rockets in the same way. I think it's James Harden, and then is based on the decline of Russell Westbrook in terms of his jump shot because it's absolutely deteriorated. Do they want to continue with that pairing? That's an unknown. And then beyond that, they ship out Covington. Is the new coach going to want to proceed with no big men? No disrespect to PJ Tucker, but you'd like to have a little bit more size, and we saw that when they played the Lakers. Lakers just too much size, and they that's what I suspected the entire year. The Rockets looked like a team that would win a playoff series, and then they would go home against the Lakers or Clippers. That's how it turned out. But overall, in the end, not shocked, but I was surprised based on what the owner said right after the bubble, and I think it's unclear, and I don't want to make a statement on what this means for him going forward.
Take that for data. Listen, I personally think analytics is out of here. I'm with Jay. I think the analytic approach is out of here. Because like he just said, that was a Daryl Morey thing. I don't think that was a Fertitta thing. Fertitta just want to win. He don't care how he wins. I think that analytic approach, that's out of here. I don't think the next coach got to worry about that. I think between D'Antoni and Morey, that's how they wanted to play. And I wouldn't say it was 100% failure, but, it had its ups and downs, more downs than ups. That's just what it is. Listen, for me, right, I'm with Jay. This next head coach is going to be the make or break. And why I say make or break, because at some point, James Harden, what do you do with James Harden at some point? If this next coach comes in, if I'm James Harden, I finish out my contract and I go somewhere else. If I can't make it happen with this next coach. And I also think Westbrook is going to get traded or something to that along that line. He's going to be out the way. So I'm interested to see who they bring in to surround James Harden with now. Because a lot of those guys that got on that roster ain't going to get it done. Westbrook, you could send him to New York or somewhere where nobody wants to go and let him be his own guy up there, and you can get something for him, and you call it a day. So it all hinges to me on your new role players and your new head coach. And I do think this, Jeff Van Gundy, been sitting on the sideline for a while, been watching these guys play. I think he can have the same impact for the Rockets that John Gruden had for the Raiders. Because when you're in the booth and you're talking about this for so many years, you start picking up on things. You start getting used to the trends. You start getting used. Let's not forget, Jeff Van Gundy also coaches the under 21 team, I think, or under 16. So one of the Olympic teams.
USA basketball.
Coaches. Yeah. So he coaches one of those teams. So he's used to being around the younger players as well. And he's sitting on the sideline watching the current NBA the ups or the downs or what have you. So I would probably bring in Jeff Van Gundy, and then because I think Jeff Van Gundy might know a way to use James Harden that would really benefit the Houston Rockets winning as a franchise. Then you bring in the role players, like I said. You get out of here with the analytics crap, and we see where it go. But I mean, if this keeps going, I don't see James Harden in a Rockets uniform. And if he's not in a Rockets uniform, it's time for a rebuild anyway. So you might as well let everybody go and just go ahead and, accept reality and call it a day and do a rebuild, unless they get lucky like the Warriors and get some crazy, we rebuilding, but we're not really rebuilding. See you next year, some type of deal like that. But I don't know, man. Like, I'm not surprised. 13 years on the job, you can't ask for no more than that. You just can't. And I think this team peaked under his tenure. They really did. They got about as far as they was going to get with him as the GM. But as far as the changes, let's see who the head coach is. Let's see what they do with Westbrook. What's his name? Eric Gordon. Let's see what they do with those type of players, see if they can get something for him, and then change the scenery for James Harden, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I mean, really his legacy for Houston is transforming them into a winning franchise. You look at, they had their heyday, of course, in the 90s where they won the 2 finals and they had Akeem Olajuwon and all that, and then they had about a 10-year stretch where they didn't win a playoff series. I mean, it was really rough for a while, and they were not a very good franchise. They kind of middled around, and then Morey gets there in 2007, and now their winning percentage since he took over is only second to the San Antonio Spurs at 61.5%. So it's pretty good. I mean, the Rockets have been playing winning basketball for a while, but obviously they'd never gotten over the hump. And a lot of that was attributed to the Golden State Warriors, who have ruined plenty of franchises and plenty of hopes and dreams. So nothing to be too ashamed about. But obviously, if you're not first, you're last, and all that fun stuff. Jay kind of alluded to this, but the point I did want to make was I think Morey should get a lot of credit for trying. I mean, my God, the dude tried. And in an era, and especially the last 5 or 6 years, where there wasn't a lot of incentive to try, where a lot of teams just kind of were like, we'll just wait and see how this Warriors storm passes, whatever. I mean, he was throwing everything at the wall, Dwight Howard, and then, the small ball thing and everything in between. He was throwing it at the wall to see what sticks. And, they were going for broke. They were trading picks. They were going to the luxury tax. So it was fun to see at least a couple teams, rage against the darkness, where a lot of teams just decided they didn't care and they'll just wait. So good on him. And for Stone, I think one little hint we saw was after the Covington trade, they had a little bit of a room to try to go get a big man back on the team and not go full complete small ball. And I think from what I've read, that Stone was pushing for that, and then they didn't wind up happening. They kind of went along with what they had. But I think that I think they wouldn't have done it at all if guys like Stone and the owner weren't kind of in on it to begin with. But I think you'll see that philosophy kind of get pulled back a little bit. They won't be going for broke in any one capacity. I think that's the secret for the Rockets is, you've got you got a superstar in James Harden, but we know at this point he's not going to do it on his own. I mean, most guys can't. Even LeBron can't. I mean, no one can just go win a championship on their own. But the teams are so focused around Harden. Like, maybe it's the secret to maybe not go all in on making Harden the center of the universe. Like, we don't maybe need to go into all these gimmicks and analytics, and maybe you need to focus on putting the best players around him and let James Harden be the X factor on a good team that's not trying to just do anything crazy. Maybe that's the secret. And like you guys said, I'm hoping the next head coach is someone who realizes that, and Stone is someone who realizes that, and they can build a smart, coherent team around Harden and let it run, but not just go for broke and go crazy like they have the last few times. But I think that's the direction they will go in. But like I said, the biggest thing now, the biggest interesting thing left is what happens to Russell Westbrook. I mean, do they keep him? Trading him is going to be hard. I mean, that's a big contract. They don't have a ton of draft picks, and it's going to be hard to incentivize a team to take on that absolute albatross of a contract with how Westbrook played well, but not amazingly well. And we know at this point he's becoming more one-dimensional in his game, and it's hard to figure out who might trade for him. But it's the NBA. I mean, anything. I mean, like I said, maybe the Knicks they don't know any better and do it. But that's the biggest pin, I think. But we'll see. Maybe they do keep him.
I think and to the point about James Harden, Harden and Westbrook are 31 years of age. And I think that's something we can't overlook. Harden's been in Houston for 8 years now. So with the way they've utilized him, especially since Mike D'Antoni has come on board, you gotta wonder at some point when we're going to see the decline. It's got to be in the next couple of years. He probably can't get much better, and all of those minutes and all that responsibility, because the guy just has the ball pretty much before, especially before Westbrook came on board, had the ball like the whole entire game. I mean, even when Chris Paul came, it seemed like CP3 really only ran the show when Harden was getting a rest. So you got to believe at some point that they're going to want to pull back and, let somebody else take some of that responsibility off his shoulders. Because you can probably see it. You see it come playoff time. I mean, typically what we've seen the last, in the James Harden era in Houston is that he's worn down low in the playoffs and hasn't been able to, make those game-winning plays. And then to your point on small ball and how they went all in, you give Morey credit for, just trying everything. And I think that's what, again, I just want to echo that. I think the man tried everything he could, and given what he was going up against, especially in Golden State, it's probably as good as you could have done. But definitely with making the decision at the trade deadline to send Capella away, they really had nowhere else to go. I mean, when you talk that they could only really play one way. They had no inside presence. And when you do that, and people got caught up with some of the early success they had with the small ball, and they beat the Lakers in the regular season. Like, oh, they can beat the Lakers with it. But we all knew, at least if you're paying attention, it wasn't going to work in a 7-game series, and that's what ultimately ended up happening. So when they went in all in on that, now and that was a good nugget you had about what Raphael Stone may want to do. They got to go back to some sort of being somewhat conventional, so they don't get boxed into just, well, we can only play one way, and if another team is got some a good group of bigs, then we just lose. So they got to rectify that quickly.